that will be, so if it suddenly just goes blank, you'll know why. Although my Facebook Live should still work because that's on a phone that's getting connection from who knows where. Okay, so as you know, a couple of weeks is Shavuos. I wanted to speak a couple of words about Shavuos. But first, I wanted to speak about some halachos that people might be. I'm chuckling again. I better stop. I think I should perhaps tie myself into the chair so I cannot move, and that might help. Maybe I'll go back to giving my shir in the garage where I had my stender and I could stand further back. But then there's a problem for hosting and seeing everybody. Anyway, hello to the new people who have joined, and to Dory, and to Harry Brown, and to Sandy and David. So I wanted to say a few explanations of some of the Shailos that you might have heard that are going around and doing the rounds. But before that, something happened to me just a few hours ago, and I thought it's something I better share with everybody because it's very, very important halachically. So my wife and I were ordering some food on Grubhub. So you order the food, it's a website, and they deliver it to your door. Especially when it was pouring with rain, we couldn't be bothered going out, we wanted to order some food, so we ordered it on Grubhub. And what happened? The food came, but it came with absolutely no tape, halachic tape on it whatsoever. It was just in a bag. The bag was actually knotted, and also there's no receipt, because if you go through one of these websites, the receipt is online, and therefore you don't get a physical receipt. So you can't say there was even any semblance of a siman, a guide, a telltale sign that this was from a kosher restaurant, and therefore it's forbidden to have that food. Meat really needs to have two seals. You need to, if you have meat that's sent by a goy, or you leave it with a goy, you have to have two seals, simanim, or at least one good seal that's basically tamper-proof. I don't know if anybody sees the big deliveries of meat that the stores get. You'll see that they have little plumbers on them, and they all have tape. They all have stickers inside them and a tape around them, or they have strips that you can't cut. You can cut, but then you can't put them back together again. So if you're tampered with, you can't hide it. So it's very important to know. So obviously I found it at the restaurant. I couldn't eat it. And not only could I not eat it, I can't give it back to the restaurant because they can't give it to anybody. They can't sell it again because the food is forbidden now for Jews. So therefore, they gave me complimentary, of course. They gave me a repeat order. So they gave me the same food again, a replacement set of food. And I will give the food, it's been pouring with rain, so I haven't gone out to any of my neighbors that are non-Jewish. And I will give it to a non-Jew. So it's important when people are ordering food from these websites, or even if you order it directly from a store, it's got to come with kosher tape. So if it's from an ORB restaurant, it must come with ORB tape around it in such a way that nobody could take things in or out without taking off the tape. And if the tape is around the top of the bag and you get a bag that's ripped at the bottom, you also can't use it because maybe they substituted, that's why they ripped the bag. Maybe they took out the kosher meat and replaced it with a non-kosher meat or something like that. Or maybe Mr. Grubhub went and bought the same food much cheaper somewhere else and he pocketed the money. So that's why you have to be very careful that if you're ordering online, you've got to make sure it comes with the chosamos, the seals, the tamper-proof tape or whatever. That tape, by the way, you should know, is special tape that you're supposed to put the two ends together when they do it in the store. And if you take off the two ends, you ruin the words, as opposed to ordinary tape where it might not. This tape, the words will come off. So even if you want to undo it and reattach it, you'll still notice that some of the tape, the letters have been rubbed away. So that's something that happened to me, and I wanted to make sure, just good opportunity to remind everybody the guy said, happened to the rabbi, now he can use this to remind everybody. So that's important. Wanted to start with that. The other thing I wanted to talk about is, I'm sure a lot of you have all seen going around guidelines, halachic guidelines, about laning and about davening and about various different aspects of tefillah when shuls, when they open in a social distanced way, There's different things that have to happen. And, of course, there are different of opinions. And the OU guide and the Aguda guide and what they're doing in Israel is different to some of the guidelines that were offered here. So as you know, regularly in my shir, I like to make people aware of some of the ideas behind things. I know a lot of people are very cynical and they like to think that everything's just this, that, the other, but I like to make people aware of what some of the rationale behind these rulings are. So let's start at the beginning. Let's start with laning. Laning, obviously we have the Torah. We know there's a mitzvah to read from the Torah all the time, to learn Torah all the time. But Moshe Rabbeinu, he instituted that we must lane every Shabbos. We got to lane the Torah every Shabbos. Then Yehoshua said we must lane every 3 days, so we don't go 3 days without Torah. And then the rabbis decided that we must make brachos, we must make blessings on the Torah. The rabbis instituted blessings. We make a blessing when we eat an apple. We make a blessing when we do all sorts of mitzvahs. And they said we must make blessings also when we read from the Torah. This shouldn't be confused with the bracha we make when we wake up every morning. The first thing we do when we wake up, we wash our hands. We say Modanis, we say Birchas HaTorah. You must say Birchas HaTorah straight away, because you can't do any learning without saying the bracha. And of course, the first thing you're going to do in life, when you wake up and you're so grateful Hashem has given you another day as a Jew, of course you're going to learn. You're not even supposed to think about words of Torah without saying the bracha, and no Jew goes a few minutes even without thinking some idea of Torah. So of course, you have to say Birchas HaTorah straight away. That, according to the Rambam, is min HaTorah. That is, he counts that as a mitzvah. Mitzvah min HaTorah, to make a bracha on the Torah. So that bracha, it's min HaTorah, it's one of the biblical mitzvahs. In fact, the Gemara says, the Gemara quotes the pasuk, why was the first Beis HaMikdash destroyed? Alma of the Haaretz. Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah asked the question, I can't remember off the top of my head where it is. He says, Alma of the Haaretz, why was the first Beis HaMikdash destroyed? We must read this probably in the Haftorah, one of the Haftorahs by around Tisha B'Av, it must be. I recognize it from one of those. Al ozvum es Torasi. They forsook my Torah. They didn't keep my Torah. Says the Gemara in Yoma, what does that mean? Shalai baruchu ba Torah tchila. They learned the Torah, they kept the Torah, but they didn't make a blessing on it. Because that shows we don't really care about it, we're not excited about it, therefore they didn't make a bracha on it, and that's why the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. So making a bracha on the Torah is very, very important. And the Mishnah Berurah, the halach is hechmiru ba ma'od. You got to be very, very, very careful with Birchas HaTorah. You got to be very careful, and it's a great mitzvah. Did I leave the place open where I could see the bracha? Hechmiru ba ma'od. They made it something that you got to be very careful about, and it says you got to bless it with a lot of simcha. With a lot of, I think it's at the beginning of the, anyway, whatever it is, and you've got to make the bracha with a lot of simcha. That's the first Birchas HaTorah. But the rabbis instituted, we make a bracha when we lane. Now they made different days for different amount of brachos. So, during the week, people are very busy, they don't have much time, so they said just 3 brachos. Rosh Chodesh, where some people have the meaning not to do work, that's one of the things Haman complained about. He said the Jews are never working. It's Rosh Chodesh, they don't work. Yom Tov, they don't work. Chanukah, they don't work. So therefore, Chanukah was afterwards, right? Purim was before Chanukah, yes. Purim was in the first Beis HaMikdash in the exile, and Chanukah was much later. So he obviously didn't include Chanukah. But he complained that all these days that they're not working. So some people don't work Rosh Chodesh. And what's the other one? Chol HaMoed. People don't work Chol HaMoed, so they made 4 aliyahs on those days. Yom Tov, people don't work, of course, so they made 5 aliyahs. And also we're going up in the Kedusha. So the weekday, and then you have Rosh Chodesh has got more holiness, and then Yom Tov has more holiness. Yom Kippur has 6 aliyahs. That's even more holy. And Shabbos is the holiest day, has 7 aliyahs. Now, as you know, in Yiddishkeit, everything is symbolized. So 7, obviously, 7 days of the week is Shabbos, 7 Sephiros, 7 I see I'm going to mention Sheila Hecker again because some will explain it. Maybe we can get him to give a pre-Shavuos Zoom drasha for us if he's available, who knows, to explain to us what all these spheres are all about. But basically, 7 is a very holy number. We know that 7 years in Shemitah. We had last week's Parsha, 7 Shemitah cycles is Yovel. So 7 is a very special holy number. So Shabbos has 7 Aliyos. There's obviously more symbolized ideas, but that's the basic idea. So we take out the Torah and we lay on Shabbos and we call up 7 people. These people come up and they make a bracha on the Torah. They make a bracha on the Torah. So what do they have to do when they make a bracha on the Torah? So the Mishnah Berurah in Orach Chaim, Siman Kuf Men Aleph 411, 141 says like this: that the person comes up, and of course here we go. La Yikru Shnayim, 2 people shouldn't read at the same time. El Ha'ayre Koire, the person who comes up to call out to read, he reads, or Shliach Tzibur Shosek, and he is quiet. Nowadays we changed it because people couldn't read, so they instituted you have a Bal Koreh. Umikol Mokem, nevertheless, if you have a Bal Koreh and somebody is called to the Liyah, Sarech Likrois im Shliach Tzibur, he has to read a bit of the laning with the Shliach Tzibur. Sheloi tihei b'chosrei levatolo. Shouldn't be that his bracha is for nothing. The same way if I make a bracha on this cup of water and I don't drink it, I just make the bracha shehakol niyeh b'dvara and I don't drink it, it's a bracha levatolo. It's a wasted bracha. If I make the bracha, I have to eat. If I want to eat an apple, I make a bracha, I eat the apple. So the same with the bracha on the Torah. I make a bracha, I have to learn, I have to read it. So if I just make the bracha and go sit down in my seat, it's a wasted bracha. It's a bracha levatolo, which we know is very serious. You're not supposed to make a bracha, you don't need to. Mentioning Hashem's name in vain in a bracha is a serious avera, and therefore you have to read with. You've got to read quietly. You shouldn't even hear it with your own ears, because obviously then you'll disturb the Bal Koreh, you'll disturb everybody else, and therefore you have to read it very quietly. So you see clearly that you have to read along. And then it goes further, that what do? You come up, you look at the place where you're supposed to read, and then you make the bracha on that place. Why? Because that section of the Torah you're about to read, that's like your apple. That's what you're about to eat. If I don't know where I'm going to make the bracha, it's like I'm making my bracha. Am I having an apple? Am I having an orange, a banana? It's confusing. You have to know what you're going to eat. I can't say, well, I'm going to make a bracha, and then, I'm having a banana. That's a different bracha. So therefore you have to know what you're going to eat. Same with the Torah. You have to know what you're making the bracha on. So you come, you see, yes, this is where we're about to start, and I make the bracha on it. Some people even have the minute they want to see where they finish. Maybe they want to see the top of the apple and they want to see the bottom of the apple. How many bites do I need to eat? How much of my greens am I going to get today from my apple? So therefore, you have to see and you have to read along with the Shliach Tzibur. So the question then is, can a blind man ever get an aliyah? A blind man can't see, right? He can't see where he's making the bracha, and he can't see, right? He might be able to read along because he's hearing you, but he can't really see the words, and you have to see it and read it. So can a blind man get an aliyah? Next question, not just a blind man. Nowadays we have many shuls that have many people that can't read. They don't even know Hebrew. They don't even recognize the words. Can these people get an aliyah? So to cut a long story short, because there's a lot of discussion about it, it says the Mishnah Berurah, v'haminig, that the minig is that we can call up a summa and an amaretz. Why? So says the Pei Halacha, it goes through, because if you never call a blind man and an amaretz, somebody who doesn't know, an ignoramus, they translate it, somebody who doesn't know how to read, then lo yikrom l'olam, they'll never get an aliyah, right? Ve'iku kisufa, it's embarrassment, right? Oh, we're never calling him, it's embarrassing. Oh, you never get an aliyahs. Why don't you get any aliyahs? What's going on? He never gets called up. Why is he never getting called up? Oh, he has your tag today. Why is he not getting an aliyah? Very embarrassing. And we know we don't want to overly embarrass anybody. V'gam osul in suye. Also, they'll come to argue. They'll start fighting. Hey, it's not fair. Why are you never giving me aliyah? What's going on? Okay, a blind man is different. We can say, well, you can't see, and maybe he'll appreciate it. But certainly when it comes to an Amoritz, can you imagine if you vetted everybody who came up for an Aliyah? I mean, there are shuls that don't give Aliyahs to people who are not Shomer Shabbos. In fact, when the Eruv came out in London, there was a whole big tumult because some people said it's not a kosher Eruv because there was a big road, the North Circular that goes through. Some people said is a Reshus HaRabim, and you can't make an Eruv in a Reshus HaRabim. And they held that if you carry in the Eruv in London, it's like you've carried in the street, and therefore you're Mechalel Shabbos. So a lot of shuls won't give an Aliyah to anybody who carried in the Eruv. So therefore that's how particular some people are. But can you imagine if you say, oh, can you read with? Do you know Hebrew? Do you understand? Can you imagine the fights and the embarrassment that will be? So they said, okay, you can have somebody who reads and is blind can have an Aliyah. So now comes the question of social distancing. So social distancing, we don't have too many people together. We'll get to the next page. We'll discuss about the Gabbai and the people at the side. We'll discuss that soon. But with social distancing, how can you have the Baal Koreh and you have the person who's having the Aliyah? If they're going to be together, what are you going to do? That is not within the rules of social distancing. Now, I haven't seen anybody who says that if you call people out for an Aliyah, they've got to come up in a full hazmat suit. That's my idea. I've not seen anyone who says that. Because if you're in a full hazmat suit, you're not a danger to anybody. So that would be my rule. Tell everybody you want an Aliyah, you put on a hazmat suit with a whole garb, and then you come and give your Aliyah. But that's not one of the suggestions that anybody has given. So we've seen that you can call a blind man and somebody who doesn't know how to read. So then, does that mean, and this is what Ramosha Sternbuch says, I've got it here, hold on, I've got his tshuva, when I did have it, hold on, now it's gone, here, we got it, hold on, I've got it, hold on, my computer doesn't have a webcam, and it doesn't have a webcam, it doesn't have a microphone, so I can't use it for Zoom. I'm very frum, I don't have a webcam, so I have to use my portable device, but I can use it to read out Ramosha Sternbuch in his response on Porch Minyanim. It's called, you have all these Shailos. There was a whole sefer which we'll come to in a minute, written by Rabbi Weiss called Hilchas Corona. Also from YU, Reb Hershel Shafter put out a sefer called Hilchas Corona, Sefer Corona, because of all the Shailos that have come up at the moment. Rabbi Weiss, don't forget, was going to come on the 15th of March and give a talk about end-of-life issues that I was telling everybody to go to. That, of course, was cancelled. He's a great big posek in Israel, especially famous for his medical knowledge and his medical understanding of halachas. He's well sought after for all sorts of medical shilas. But anyway, so Ramosha Sternbuch, who's the head of the Av Beis Din of Yerushalayim, the Eidah HaCharedus, he says that just like you call up a blind man, so people can read from a distance. What difference does it make if it's a blind man getting an Aliyah, or somebody who can't do it, or if you've got Chaim Yankel sitting 6 feet away in the first or second row having an Aliyah? You call him up, he looks at the Torah from a distance, and he makes the bracha, and then he can stand there, and the person reads. So that's what he says, that you don't have to read like we see from this with a blind man, and you can recite the blessing from a significant distance, even from another porch, because he was talking about porch minyanim, because apparently what they did was, they have all these porches on the outside of the building, so everybody came out into their porch, they had one person downstairs with the Sefer Torah, and therefore they called people for the aliyahs from the different porches, and they could make the bracha from their porch. That's what he paskins, that you sit in the back row, or wherever it is, and you stand up, you make your bracha from there. And that was the first idea, I believe, in the OU guide. They suggested that as one method. But yet the American Rabbonim, because this is what OU preferred you to do, and this is what the Aguda preferred you to do, they prefer you to go and follow Reb Asher Weiss. Reb Asher Weiss said that no, you've got to go and stand next to the Torah. A blind man, at least he's standing next to the Torah. At least he's there, and therefore you cannot have an aliyah from a distance unless you can read, and therefore he suggests that you have to give all the aliyahs to the person who is laning. Even if he's a Kohen, doesn't matter. So the person who's laning gets all 7 aliyahs. Let's hope it's not in the shul that schnodder money, because then he's going to be out of pocket, especially if it goes on for a few weeks and he has to pay for all 7 aliyahs. He's going to be significantly out of pocket, especially if he's giving chai for each one. I mean, you know what I mean? It's a lot of money each week. That will cover his wages for reading the Torah. So he suggests that no, you've got to give all the aliyahs to the person who's laning, because he can see the bracha, he makes the bracha, he's reading, and he has to have all the aliyahs. So those are the two approaches, and the Agudah and the Aliyot prefer to use that approach. But there is a third approach from Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef, who is the Sephardi chief rabbi of Israel, the Rishon LeZion. He suggests that you should do, yes, the person who's laning should get all the aliyahs, but what he should do is you should get 7 people or 6 people, because then you have the person laning every week will finish off. They should prepare 3 verses, because that's the minimum amount of verses you need for an aliyah. Prepare 3 psukim. You get 6 people doing 3 psukim for 6 aliyahs, and then the rest of the parasha, so it's a bit lopsided. You've got 6 aliyahs of 3 psukim, and then, like this week, Parshas Bamidbar, it's one of the longest parashas of the Torah. It's massive. Noso is even longer, 186 psukim, so these are massive parashas. So can you imagine if the next week, 186 psukim, the first 6 aliyahs is 18 psukim, right? So then you're left with 118 in the first 6, and then the last aliyah is 168 psukim, right? Can you imagine how lopsided that's going to be? But that's how he suggests. Get 6 people, they prepare 3 psukim, they come up on their own, and then the last person comes up and he reads the whole Torah and finishes off the parasha. Now, then he comes up with another idea. Try this one for size. He says, or you should take out 2 Sifrei Torah. One of them you put on the bimah to lane from, and the other Sefer Torah you give to the person who's having the aliyah. So let's say you put it somewhere else. I think it's a bit difficult for our shul because we don't have the space. So when he gets called up to the aliyah, he goes to the second Sefer Torah, makes the bracha, reads along from a kosher Sefer Torah, whilst the other guy is laning from a social distance on the real bimah. So it's a bit strange, right? Taking out 2 Sifrei Torah. Might look a bit strange, but that's what he says. Take out 2 Torahs, one that you lane from, and one that you call up the people with the aliyahs. So those, if you like, are the 3 main ideas. Nobody suggests my idea of a hazmat suit, but that is, be that as it may. So that's what some of the rationale behind how we are going to do aliyahs. The American Rabbonim favor the idea of the person laning getting all 7 aliyahs, unless you have multiple people who can lane, and then you can split it up with that way. But especially in a shul like ours, that might be a little bit more difficult. Although if it's 3, because you have to lane properly, you have to read the words properly, and according to the Rambam, the tune has to be done properly too. You can't just say, well, I'll just read the words. You got to do the tune as well. So that is a little bit of a rationale behind some of the ideas of laning. What about the people standing around the bimah? Right? Normally we have the gabbai on one side, person obviously laning, person getting an aliyah, and moshels have a 4th person standing on the other side of the bimah. So what happens to all these people? What are they even doing there in the first place? So let's have a look. This again is in the same place, Kuf Mem Aleph 141. This time it's in Siman Daled. If the person laning the Balkodah wants to have an aliyah himself, you got to have somebody else standing next to him. So even if he's doing all the aliyahs, you have to have somebody next to him. Why? Because the Torah was given through an intermediary, because the first 2 mitzvos, they heard from Hashem. The last 8 mitzvos, Hashem told them to Moshe, and Moshe told them to the Jewish people. So you had 2 people there, God and Moshe. So same as with laning. Laning, you have to have 2 people, one as God and one as Moses. I see Gary is on. I'm going to give him a God complex in a minute. But anyway, so therefore, you have to have these 2 people. So says the Mishnah Berurah, Noyagim Shahad Gabbai or Koine Mitzvahs Oidimate Let's Sefer Torah. The person who is the Gabbai or the one who bought all the mitzvahs, he stands next to the Sefer Torah. V'zeh Nikvus Gan. Kedei Sheyeh Gimel. So there should be 3 people. The Gabbai, person laning, the person getting the Aliyah. And then it goes on to say that most people have 4. You have one person either side, left, right, and there's machlokas about who stands on the left, who stands on the right. We won't go into that now. So according to one reason, why do we need 3 people? Keneged Avos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, it's Keneged the Avos. Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the forefathers of Yiddishkeit. So we have Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov standing there when we're doing the Sefer Torah. Another reason, like we said, is because I have a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Now listen carefully to the wording, because the wording is very important. He says, Minag Hakadmonim. This is an ancient custom. Lamoid Gimel Eitzel HaSefer Torah. And then he goes on to say that the Gabbai, as I said, I'm going to give Gary a God complex. He is like God. He is like Hashem. And that's why it goes on to say that the Gabbai has to stand there with extra Kedusha. He has to have extra feeling. And it goes on to say that what is not allowed, that the Gabbai is not allowed to get angry because he's like Hashem. You have a look. Kuf Mem Aleph, 141, Siv Zayin, Tes Zayin, 16, goes through all the rules of a Gabbai, and then it says you mustn't argue with the Gabbai, you mustn't shout at the Gabbai, and so on. That's only while he's being the Gabbai in Shul. Once he's left, and after davening, then you can shout at him. But while he's there with the Sefer Torah, and he's got his God complex, then you're not allowed to shout at him. And listen to this. It says, and if the Gabbai gets in a huff, and he walks off, that's a terrible Aveira. Why? Because im Adam Chata, if a man sins, you get somebody who sins, Sefer Torah lama bish. Just because a man sins, you embarrass a Sefer Torah? Okay, so that's a little bit about the Gabbai and the respect you have for him and the respect he has to have from the Sefer Torah. But once you go into the Kiddush room, then you can start arguing, why didn't I get this Aliyah? Why did you give him, like we said earlier about people getting annoyed about Aliyahs, which is why we give a blind man an Aliyah. So we said, Nohagu, this is a minig. It's not a din, it's not a chiyuv or part of the laning, it is a minhag. So because it's a minhag, because it is a custom, albeit a very special custom, albeit a very important custom, don't get me wrong, and we don't just ignore customs just like that, unless you're trying to sneak in some contraband, then we ignore customs as much as we can, but otherwise we have to try and, I'm not telling you to do that, I'm just making a joke, but anyway, so we have to keep customs, but when it comes to being lenient, and it comes to being makel, then there is a protocol of what you can be more lenient in, and since this is a minhag, this is a custom, then when it comes to social distancing, we can do away with it, unless your shul is big enough that obviously you can have space either side, that you've got 6 feet away, that the person is the Gabbai. Or, just like I said, for people with Aliyah should wear hazmat suits, maybe the Gabbai as well. We should have the Gabbai in a hazmat suit, the person having the Aliyah in a hazmat suit, and then with all the changing of the Aliyahs and the hazmat suits, we'll have a long davening, and it will take extra long, and everybody will shout and complain and not bother coming back again, and then we won't need to worry about laning in hazmat suits anymore. But that's just my idea, so we don't have to have the Gabbai, especially if the person who's laning is getting all the Aliyahs, then you don't need the Gabbai, because a person, I don't know, it might be weird, you make the bracha, lane, make a bracha, stop, make a bracha again. I don't know, does he get all 7 Misha Berachs? Do we have to make a Misha Berach in between each one for him? I don't know. But we don't need to have those 3 people and I suppose the idea of the Rav Yosef, the Rishon LeZion, about taking out 2 Torahs, one for the laning and one for the person who is having the Aliyah, that wouldn't apply to the Gabbai, because the whole point is having them together. So to say we'll take out 3 Sifrei Torah, one for the Gabbai to stand next to, one for the Aliyah, and one for the person who's laning, I think that might be a little bit much. Unless, actually, if they're within Dalad Amos is 8 feet. If everybody's within Daled Amas, maybe that counts as being together. So maybe we should take out 3 Sifrei Torah, we'll put them on different tables, spread out in the shul, and then we can say we're keeping it all. But that's a little bit of a rationale behind some of these minhagim. Now I want to talk about, what time is it? 8:02. So what about davening? Again, there's a big difference of opinion as to what halachically constitutes gathering for a minyan. So if we look in the Mishnah Berurah, this is in Chelik Aleph Siv Nun Hey, very complicated as to if you have people in one room and the other room, can they consider themselves as a minyan? If you have 5 in one room, 5 in another room, 5 indoors, 5 outdoors, it depends where you have the person who's the Shliach Tzibur. But the problem with all that is very good. That's in a shul, that's in different rooms, upstairs, downstairs. The Ezvas Nashim has 2-way glass, and therefore it's a separate room. That's all one thing. But what about courtyards? So it says, Chotzer, a courtyard, a courtyard, I'll paraphrase because it's long and complicated. Basically it goes on to say if you have 2 courtyards, then you have a problem and they can't be mitzvah, they can't join together. Another problem is if you have a road. If you have a road that goes between, let's say I have 5 people on this side of the road and I have 5 people on the other side of the road, even though I can all see each other, but because there's a road or a shutza rabbin that goes in between, does that invalidate the minyan? There's a din by payah where you have to leave the corner of your field for the poor people, which we read about a couple of weeks ago. So in order to work out what is your field, one of the things that divide between fields is a road. If I have a public road going in between my field, that splits my field into 2, and I have to leave 2 corners of one corner of 2 fields for the poor. Whereas if there was no road, it will be counted as one field. So you see that a road in between can block and differentiate between domains. So if you have 5 people on one side of the road, 5 people on the other side of the road, does that constitute a minyan? So again, we have a good old machlokas. So in Eretz Yisrael, Reb Moshe Sternbuch, like we mentioned before, he says, he paskened in this halachas of porches. You know, you have all these new titles, Hilchas Corona Sefer and Porch Minyanim halachas. Very sad, but it is. He argues that porch minyanim are okay. That because you can see each other, you can be mekel. There are people, the levush, I don't want to go into all now because it's late and it's complicated to understand all the differences between courtyards and different rooms. Complicated, but there are people who are lenient and say, even if you're in different places, but you, at least one of you, the Shliach Tzibur, can see everybody, that's good enough. So in Eretz Yisrael, they are mekel. However, like I said, in America, you should know that there are a lot of differences in halacha between America and Eretz Yisrael. And England, they always say, goes after Eretz Yisrael. Why? Because England used to have Dayan Weiss, was the head of the Manchester Beis Din, and then he went to become the head of the Eder Charedus, the head of the Israeli Beis Din. So a lot of the halachas are the same. But there are many halachas that in Eretz Yisrael, in America, are different. Kitnios on Pesach, cotton seed oil in Eretz Yisrael, they say it's kitnios, and in America they don't. There's a many in America they allow buffalo to be counted as kosher, and in Eretz Yisrael they're more machmir on it, so they don't allow buffalo because they say that's. I'm not going into all the rationales behind it, but there are many differences in halacha in Hilchos Shabbos. There are many differences usually in Eretz Yisrael. They're a lot more machmir, stringent on certain things in Hilchos Shabbos, whereas in America they're a lot more mekel. So there are differences. That's why I say the American, and then I talk about the Eretz Yisrael because they are different. Levayas are different. There's different customs about things and so on and so forth. So there are big differences. So in Eretz Yisrael they were mekel, and they allowed these minyanim, different types of the street. Each porch is like its own house, but yet they allowed them to be counted as one. However, Reb Mordechai Willig, I'm sure you've all heard of Reb Mordechai Willig. He's the Rav in, he's one of the Rosh Yeshiva in YU. I'm not an expert in YU. I know Reb Hershel Schachter is a Rosh Yeshiva. I know he's a Rosh Yeshiva, and so on. And I know you've got other different Rabbanim and so on. So I'm not sure if there's different yeshivas or if they're all just 2 Rabbanim of the same yeshiva. I must admit I never went there, which may be why I'm considered a bit of a pariah in American circles, and they wouldn't let me join the RCA because I never went to YU. But fear not, because I now have after 3 months after joining the Rabbinical Council of America, I finally have a Rabbinical Alliance of America. I finally have my rabbinical card, my flashy rabbinical card. So do not fear, do not worry about that. But anyway, so Reb Mordechai Willig said, where was I now? I've lost my... that's right. I got carried away with my young gaiva, you see. Like Moshe Rabbeinu, when he got angry, he forgot the halacha. So when I got carried away with my gaiva, I forgot where I was. But anyway, we're talking about porch minyanim. So Mordechai Willig said, we started off with the Sefer Torah by saying there's a big problem of a bracha levatola, right? We said making a bracha in vain or in error is a big problem. So Mordechai Willig, he suggested a compromise. He said, if you have these minyanim in the streets when they're allowed to happen, right, when it's permitted to happen, or you have different porches, whatever, that can be considered as a minyan for Kaddish, because Kaddish is not a bracha, but you need a minyan for it. It can be counted as a minyan for Kedusha, so you have one person saying Shemona Esra, and that's it. It can be counted as a minyan for Baruch Hu, and that's it. Not for Shemona Esra repetition, because then you're making brachos, and that's a problem of a sofek bracha lahake, making a sofek doubtful bracha in error. And also it's not good for making brachas on laning. Because again, making a bracha on laning in a sofek minyan is also a problem. So he suggested if you're having a minyan across the street, then you should not say the Chazar Tashatz. I wouldn't say Chazar Tashatz anyway for two reasons. One, because people want to make the time quicker to minimize the time of being outside. And also, having Chazar Tashatz in these funny places, outdoors, and there's so much noise and this, that, the other, it turns it into a little bit of a, wouldn't say a farce, because that's maybe too strong of a word, and everyone's strolling about, you know how it is, and whatever, and you can hardly hear the person. It's not a good idea, especially nowadays where everybody davens on their own, and we're only doing Chazar Tashatz, as if you like, as a bit like Yom Tov Sheni. That's what they used to do, so we'll still do it. But I certainly wouldn't do Chazar Tashatz. So that's what Reb Mordechai Willig said that they should do in America. But again, you know, you have different people come up with different ideas as to what they're going to do when and if we reopen in whatever state that we do. But it's important to know that you could go to one shul or one minyan that does something one way, and then the next week you go to another shul and they do something different, right? The same is with Shabbos. One week you can go to a person's house and they're, I don't know, opening cans of soda, right? And the next week you go and you go to a house and they don't open cans of soda. In fact, Mordechai Willig said he doesn't like opening cans of soda on Shabbos. We're not going into that now. I know a lot of people are makel or lenient that you can open soda cans on Shabbos, but he said one shouldn't. So again, you have all these difference of opinions, and you could have different ones. But we will come to that bridge, cross that bridge, or maybe not cross the bridge, because then we'll get further away from the minyan and we'll be across different sides of the water, and therefore that will be a problem for our minyan. So we won't cross the bridge, but we'll discuss it when it's nearer the time. What time do we have here? 8:10. Okay, so I had a few more halachic discussions that we won't be able to get to, but just something about Shavuos. We're all thinking about Shavuos, so the first thing that comes to mind is Rosh Chodesh. Don't forget, obviously, this Shabbos, we're not reading the Haftorah of Parshas Bamidbar, because Sunday is Rosh Chodesh. We're reading the special Haftorah of Machar Chodesh. So when you are reading in your own house, Machar Chodesh, the Haftorah, do not read Parshas Bamidbar Haftorah. We need to read the Haftorah for Machar Chodesh. So we do not say Tachnun, according to everybody, in the first few days of Iyar. So from Rosh Chodesh, there'll be no Tachnun. Why? Because that's when they got to Har Sinai. They came to Har Sinai. Moshe went up the mountain on the second day, came down. Hashem Tiyu La'am, be my people. They said yes. The fifth day they said Na'aseh v'nishma. So because all these wonderful, amazing things were happening, it's got a day of like a Yom Tov. Then the last 3 days before Shavuot, so the 3 days Har Sinai was boarded. So it was so special, the Kedusha. So we don't say Tachnun. So everybody agrees there is no Tachnun from the beginning of Rosh Chodesh till at least the end of Shavuot. Now, if you look in the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah, that's all they say. All they say, there's no Tachnun till after Shavuos. But after Isru Chag, we say Tachnun. However, there is a new minhag. Perhaps it's based on the Hasidim, because Hasidim don't like to say Tachnun, but no, the Mishnah Berurah quotes it in Hilchas Tachnun, that there are some people that don't say Tachnun until the 13th day of Iyar. Why? Because there is a din that you have to come to the Beis HaMikdash on the 3 Yomim Tovim, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. You got to come. But you're not allowed to come empty-handed. You got to bring at least 2 animals, Oilas Re'iyah, Korban Oila, and the Shalmei Chagiga. So the Korban Oila gets offered to Hashem, and the Shlamim you eat. That's your Yom Tov meat. And you're not allowed to come. If you come and you don't bring an offering, it's Bittul Aseh, it's an Aveira, and so on. So everyone had to bring a korban. So you don't have to bring it straight away. In fact, you couldn't bring it on Yom Tov according to some opinions, because you're not allowed to offer it on Yom Tov. That's a machlokes in the Gemara, whether you could offer it on Yom Tov or you had to wait till Chol HaMoed. So Pesach you get 7 days, and Shavuos you get Sukkot you get 7 days. But it's not fair. Shavuos is 1 day. So the halacha is you've got 6 makeup days to bring your sacrifice after Shavuos. So it's strange. Even though Shavuos has passed already, Shavuos was 5 days ago, I can still offer my Shavuos sacrifice till 6 days, or till the 7th day, including first day Shavuos. So came along people and said, aha! So if you can still offer your Yom Tov sacrifice, it's like it's a Yom Tov. And if it's like it's a Yom Tov, we don't say Tachnun. Although I'm sure these people are going to work, and therefore it's whatever, but it's a happy day, so they don't say Tachnun. So a lot of people, and that in fact is the minhag of our shul, that we don't say Tachnun until the 13th of Iyar. Although there are people who try and get an extra day, because they say, well, Chutz La'aretz, you have to add in an extra day. So Yom Tov could have been the 2nd day of Yom Tov, so you take that as day 1, and take 7 days until the 14th. But Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach answers, yeah, but if it was the korban that we're talking about, the korban is only in the Beis HaMikdash. The Beis HaMikdash was the 1st day Yom Tov, so you can only keep the 1st day Yom Tov. But there are some shuls that don't say Tachnun till the 14th of Iyar. The Chazon Ish said one should definitely say Tachnun, so this isn't just a worldwide thing that nobody says Tachnun. A lot of people do say Tachnun. You should be aware that not saying Tachnun includes things like it doesn't apply this year because there's no Shabbos in the middle, but we don't say Sitkot Chot Tzedek when we don't say Tachnun, and we don't say the prayers after the laning, the Hirotzones, if we don't say Tachnun. When we go to a Levaya, we don't say the Tziddik Adin when we don't say Tachnun. So there are other things that go along with not saying Tachnun. So that's a little bit of the rationale about why we don't say Tachnun. Hopefully next week in Mirza Hashem we'll discuss a little bit more of the halachos of meat and milk, and this idea of having dairy on Shavuos, waiting up all night, staying up all night, making late. Those of you who were here last year remember that we did not wait 2nd night Yom Tov. Remember, we davened early, and I told everyone to eat their meal early, light the candles, and eat the meal early, like you would do if it was the 1st day Yom Tov, or if it was Erev Shabbos. This year, most people in the world will be doing that because it's Shabbos. So because it's Shabbos, everybody or most people will be bringing Yom Shabbos in early. Well, you have to bring Shabbos in early, of course, don't get me wrong, of course. But most people won't be waiting till after Nacht to daven Mariv or to say Kiddush. So that is the formal part of the Shir. I think it was suggested that we daven Mariv as a Zoom and then count the Sfira. What time is it? 8:16? Yeah, we can count the Sfira, but let me unmute everybody. And if anybody has any questions, I see Arthur, you got your hand up?
Nope, Rabbi, you're doing a great job, Rabbi.
Thank you very much, I appreciate that. Who's that? Jerry. Who?
Rabbi.
Yes, hello Gary.
Rabbi, this is Gary. I just want to point out that when you kept saying ER, you meant Sivan.
Oh, of course, yes, sorry. Yes, Sivan, sorry, my mistake, yes. When I said about Tachnun, it's of course the month of Sivan, yes. I think I have Winnie the Pooh on my mind, so I keep thinking of his horse, ER, so therefore I have ER on my mind. No?
Dave Lazar.
Hello.
How you doing, Dave?
Oh, hello.
Good, everything good.
Very good.
Oh, is that, I see Mike and I see, how are you? How's everything?
We're doing good.
Excellent.
I set this up for Katie so she can listen to what they have to say.
Excellent. How are you doing, Katie?
I'm doing pretty good, thank you.
Right, excellent. Okay, so if anyone doesn't have any questions, that doesn't make any sense. If nobody has any questions, I should say, then we'll start davening Mariv, and then when we finish Mariv, we'll count the Sephira. I should say, while everybody's still on, before we daven Mariv, that we're having a special program in Yitzhak Hashem on Friday for Yom Yerushalayim. We'll be singing some songs of Hallel. We'll be hearing from people's memories, I think, of what the first memories they were of coming to Yerushalayim. And I must admit, I've forgotten what time we said that would be. If you could remind me, Madam President?
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock. So look out for the link. 6 o'clock for our special Yom Yerushalayim program at 6 o'clock. Okay, so I'm going to wash my hands. That's why I provided myself with some water, so I can wash my hands for davening. Anybody else want to do that? Please be my guest. And now I have nothing to wipe them with. I should have brought in a towel. Never mind. Okay. And now we will... might help if I bought myself a siddur. Yes. Here we go. And we'll start with Mariv. Should I mute? No, it doesn't sound too noisy. So we'll keep everybody unmuted and we can join in with the davening. So where's Mariv? We'll just start with Baruch, because obviously we don't say Baruch Hu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'dvarei mariv harav v'mechol b'meseh shor v'mo b'zvul u'mashalitim u'machlev v'saz malim misal v'zeh k'chavim mishmalo yisayim Baruch